now I'm going to talk about inclusion, which is a little bit different from accessibility. Accessibility is access to the accommodation, but inclusion is the act of making that accommodation and opportunity available. So why is that important? And before I run through these 4 examples, I want to stress that it's important not just for the person who has the disability, it's actually important, in my strong opinion, for the whole of society. And why is that? So inclusion promotes tolerance. Inclusion helps the world to really understand difference in a more meaningful way. If people with differences and disabilities aren't included, you never get exposure to them, and so you can't ever become more tolerant of those differences. It helps us to see the person first. Sometimes when you hear about a disability, you're really focused on the disability. But when people with disabilities are included in society, you get a chance to experience them as a whole person. Julia isn't Down syndrome. She is a person who has Down syndrome. But if all you're told about Julia is that she has Down syndrome, unless you have a chance to meet her, to dance with her, to become her friend, you might only think about the Down syndrome when you hear about her. Inclusion helps people with disabilities to develop a positive self-image. It gives them an opportunity to learn skills, to make friends, to feel part of society, to contribute. And people with disabilities have a lot to contribute. So giving them that opportunity helps them with their own sense of confidence and self-image. And ultimately, it drives change. It's only through an understanding, which is nurtured through inclusion, that you can start to think of ways to make experiences better and more inclusive and more accessible to people who have all kinds of differences. So how can we be more inclusive? And I know this is a big part of why all of you are in this meeting today. The first thing is we should be mindful of how we talk. We want to use the right words. There's a lot of what people call ableist language around us. So I'll give you an example. You want to use people first language. So like I said, Julia isn't Down syndrome. She's not a Down syndrome. She's not even a Down syndrome person. She's a person first who happens to have Down syndrome. The same thing if somebody is blind. It's not a blind person. It's a person who happens to be blind. The same way, I'm not a gray-haired woman. I'm a woman who happens to have gray hair. And I'm a person who happens to have green eyes. It's a feature, one feature of the whole person that Julia is. The second thing is you want to try to avoid making assumptions. Just because somebody looks a certain way, you might draw certain conclusions about what kind of person they are, what they can or can't do, what their skills or interests might be. People might look at Julia and they might assume that she can't understand them, or that she can't read, or that she can't talk. And those assumptions would be very wrong because she can do all of those things very well. The third thing, and why it's so great that you guys are all in this class, is that you should never be scared to ask questions if you're unsure. That's how you overcome your bias. That's how you learn and do better going forward, is by asking questions. And we love to talk about these things. Julia is very comfortable talking about her disability. In fact, she's proud of the fact that she has Down syndrome. And that's why I like to do presentations like this, because it gives me a chance to answer questions for people who have them. And then the last thing is that once you've learned, in some ways you become a bit of an ambassador yourself, and you should help to educate other people and spread the word about inclusion and accessibility and difference. And when you see somebody saying the wrong thing or perpetuating stereotypes in a very kind way, you can correct them and help to educate them as well.